Namaste, all my leaders, the leaders who have been confronting very difficult times during this pandemic. Everyone is talking about the pandemic, and so am I. Uh, there have been lots of issues which the leaders have been confronting. Uh, I think number one is low market trends and very low productivity with whatever manpower and resources you have. And of course, at the end, and to top it all, is the low profitability of every organization. Today, my intention of creating this video is to address all the leaders who have taken the task, the gargantuan task, I would say, to take on the challenges of these three main issues: low market trends, low productivity, and low profitability. Now, let's discover that these challenges, what they are taking with them, but how is it that they are going to, uh, you know, overcome these challenges? That is something which needs to be discovered. So, let's go one by one. Let's first identify what are the issues, the main issues that the leaders are confronting. Let's begin with the note that change has been eternal. We all know that change has always been there. And every change has brought in some of the crisis or the crises. And in every crisis, there are challenges which have been posed. Now, every time the challenges have been posed, they have been also thwarted by the leaders or the leadership who rise to the occasion and do this every time. And today we know that we are in a different kind of crisis. This pandemic has postured a very different kind of crisis, and it is also very intense in dimension and very diverse in dimension, which we have never seen before. So, what are the kind of crisis or the issues that we have had to face? First of all, there has been no personal interaction whatsoever, no personal physical interaction, and physical congregations have not been possible. Communication is obstructive through mask, which one has to wear, and the facial expressions are not seen, so body language is obviously not fully observable. Mobility is restricted. We all know that. Permissible only during emergencies. Shop floor, both manufacturing and services sector, have had to maintain social distancing where they have been subjected to space constraints, and therefore lot of productivity issues emerging there. Then we have safety and security issues that have come in, and now in addition to safety and security, which has already been there, we have additional add-ons. We have add-ons to these issues, uh, or you know pillars. So we have safety, security, and now To add to that, we have had very intense and very strong focus on hygiene and health. It's not that hygiene and health have not been considered earlier, but the focus on hygiene and health has been enormous in this period. So, in these circumstances, the leader has to produce, he has to show his productivity with his team, and that is what is the biggest challenge. So, the first mindset, I think it's a paradigm shift that most of us leaders will have to uh, undergo, is that prior to the pandemic, the leader was a much respected and a very towering personality who, the team would look forward to as a know-it-all person. But in this pandemic situation, because nothing was predictable and nothing was possible to know in advance, the paradigm shift which has occurred with the leader is also um, in a learn it all paradigm. So, not that leader was not learning earlier, the leader was also learning earlier. But the compulsions of the crisis have forced the leader to adapt to a learn it all kind of paradigm from the know it all paradigm. So that's the paradigm shift that has occurred. Now, how do you think that the adaptation would take place with all these crises coming in, all these issues propping up, all these challenges emerging? What is it that makes the leader adapt to the crisis? Let us understand one thing here, that technology has proved to be a big boon, and especially the internet. Physical interaction has been replaced by virtual interaction. So when we spoke about physical interaction as earlier in as a challenge, that has been overcome through virtual interaction through the internet. Congregation now happens on platforms like uh, Google Meet, Cisco WebEx, Zoom, and many others. So, physical congregation is not possible, but people are meeting because it is a dire necessity to communicate with the team members and to the collaborators. And therefore, it becomes imperative that you have to have a platform where you have to interact. So, interaction is not cut off. Interaction, only physical interaction is being curtailed, curbed, and the congregation, in terms of physical congregation in a meeting or an auditorium, is what is not called for these days, and that's for the web has come to the assistance. You can meet your teammates, you can meet your um, collaborators on the computer, on the internet, on platforms which I have already mentioned. Now, one big disadvantage which I see in these kind of meetings or these kind of interactions is that the entire body language is not visible, but primarily the facial expression, the movement of the eyes are very, very observable on these platforms, and that is the major chunk of, I think, coming to a conclusion about or making inferences about the body language. So that is possible. You can see the facial expressions. You can also see the eye movement of the eyes. That is it. So I think this is, although the entire body is not visible, one is able to infer as to what the other person is trying to express. Although the entire, possibility of moving around is also curtailed. So mobility continues to be a handicap and could be undertaken in emergencies only with sufficient protection. So if it is only if there's a fire or there's you know something serious, serious disadvantage that is noticed, I think physical mobility would have to be undertaken. Otherwise, it is avoidable. So rest is managed through the videos. If there's some occurrence of a certain disaster, even a small disaster, it can be videoed, captured, and communicated through video on the internet. So that I think one will have to make a small bit of sacrifice in terms of making oneself physically available to this situation. Now, another big constraint that I see in large shop floors, whether it is manufacturing or service sector, call centers, that the physical proximity to be avoided, space constraints have emerged as one of the biggest challenges. And therefore, one has to work with less manpower. That is something where the productivity comes in for a big challenge. Small space for less manpower, and because the productivity has to be maintained, you have to stretch the man hours, which also probably tells upon the person's ability, the person's, uh, you know, um, individual productivity or contribution to whatever he's doing, his role that he's playing. So, his in order to maintain that level, the fatigue is not attained very quickly. I think there are ways and means that the leader has to devise in order to get the right kind of productivity. So it could be staggered working, it could be, um, you know, uh, alternate working or uh, different people, alternate set of people to take over from another set of people. Like in the olden days, we used to have the shifts, round the clock shifts. So it's the same operation which is being taken care of in another shift. So here the shift timings need to be shortened, and the same amount of work is to be carried out for longer number of hours. Um, as I have said earlier, that extra alertness has to be taken care of, or extra alertness has to be put through to health and hygiene factors. So health and hygiene factors are, uh, drawing a lot of focus, essentially because of this pandemic. So physical contact, washing your hands, washing your face, keeping your clothes clean, away from all kinds of germs. These are things which need to be checked by the organization and insisted by the organization, insisted by the leadership in terms of working relationships. So work cannot be stopped. The warmth in the relationships cannot be sacrificed. But at the same time, the health condition and health factors have to be taken into consideration. I remember in those earlier days when workers used to go to the furnaces and not wear their safety masks or their safety shields. It used to be a pain for any safety officer because it was a question of attitude of these workers not wearing these safety uh, equipment before they take up hazardous roles or hazardous work. In today's circumstances, I think every worker, because at the back of his mind he knows that if he's not going to observe these health and hygiene uh, factors very stringently, very strictly, it is going to affect his health, and it may also be fatal. So that fear has probably will help the leadership to ensure and implement the consciousness towards health and hygiene. Um, that is, I think, how the leaders will have to uh, take up the issues and um, address the situation. No, but for all this, I think there are certain attributes that the leader has to evolve. If he does not have them, he has to evolve them. How and in what manner is a different issue. We can take it up in another session. But one of the primary qualities that the leader has to take up is resilience, flexibility, familiarity with technology, internet. Many of the leaders, not only of our age but even younger than us, are averse to getting into technology, and they probably ask their secretaries to do the uh, computer work. But this is something which uh, has to be avoidable now, and it is a must that every leader is familiar with the computer and technology and the internet. The third thing I would say is that every leader has to be very, very perceptive. Perceptiveness is something which we cannot ignore. Incidentally, friends, I have written a book on perceptiveness, which is available on the Amazon store. Also on online, you can buy the book. It's called Our Glassrooms, not classrooms, but classrooms. So, perceptiveness is one quality which today's leader needs to have essentially. Then his acquaintance with video presentation, of course, it is very much linked to awareness of technology and the internet, but still, video presentation skills has different uh, is a different ball game, and I think it needs a lot of persistence and the awareness of how your uh, video is eventually being created. So, the quality of the video, the sound of the video, the content of the video, is it impactful? And then the next factor, which I think the leader has to possess, is his thoroughness with the role and personal attributes of each of the member of the team. It is connected with his perceptiveness, but he has to be thorough with the attributes and personal traits of each person in the team who's performing a certain role. In that role, in the gamut of that role, how his attitude and his approach and his behavior is becoming compatible or can be made more compatible. Um, and last but not the least is the consciousness of health and hygiene, which I have again and again described. And I have laid an emphasis on that factor. I would repeat that in the olden days, there was a lot of legal requirement in terms of compliances on health and hygiene, maintenance of ambulance room, and maintenance of windows, lighting, humidity, etc., which is mentioned in the Factories Act. But today, when we are talking about health and hygiene, it is a particular respect and regard to each and every individual in the organization and his health and his hygiene. So, the concern of the leader towards the personal health and hygiene of each individual in the team is very important. Thank you. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you.